So this morning I want to talk about some events, not directly, but how they parallel, well, events that took place in the last couple of days, how they kind of parallel with events that took place in the 1930s. What I mean is events that are taking place here in the United States that are very similar to some of the things that happened in the Weimar Republic and also in Nazi Germany. I'm going to go ahead and bring up some articles here. I first of all want to go to, this is on tammybruce.com, Penn and Teller. Now, Penn and Teller, they provide a Jewish perspective to the Second Amendment of the Constitution. So I'm going to go ahead and read most of this. This was published in August the 12th, 2016. And it says, the debate on the Second Amendment never ceases. But when the last time you heard an insight that hasn't been repeated 1,000 times before, Penn and Teller's interpretation was something new to me, Maynard, and I'll share it here. The Second Amendment is short and sweet. A well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. But what exactly does that mean? The latter portion is perfectly clear and inarguable to anyone who hasn't gone to grad school, but the introductory phase about the militia may give reasonable people pause. What is the connection between the right of the people to bear arms and the state of the militia, and the state militia? Would the founders have allowed a citizen to be stripped of his right to bear arms because he was not attached to a state militia? Or something like that? It's a question we should be able to answer. Penn and Teller acknowledged that the founders did indeed attach the right of the individual to bear arms to the necessity of the state militia existing and bear arms, but the relationship is the inverse of what the anti-arms people allege. I'll explain in my words, and then let the boys speak for themselves. Flashback to the Concord hymn. You'll remember these lines. By the rude bridge that arched the flood, their flag to April's breeze unfurled. Here once the embattled farmers stood and fired the shot heard round the world. This is the story of the Battle of Lexington and Concord, in brief. The British marched to seize colonial weapons and thus nipped the nascent revolution in the bud. Colonists declined to be disarmed and instead shot back, and the British retreated. The Second Amendment was written in living memory of Lexington and Concord. The founders knew that the state must necessarily maintain an armed militia. And the founders knew from world history and their personal history that a tyrant seeks to disarm an impotent, seeks a disarmed and impotent people, an imbalance of power that assures that the state can overwhelm the people if it chooses to do so. In this context, the preface of the Second Amendment's reference to the state militia isn't a matter of supporting the state militia. It's a cautionary check that the people will always have the ability to oppose the militia. The Concord hymn would have it that those that shot back against the British Army were embattled farmers. Got it? Farmers, the people. In other words, the meaning isn't the state militia must exist and be armed, so therefore you are allowed to be armed so that you can help. It's the state militia must exist and be armed, so therefore you must be armed to prevent that militia from having a monopoly on power. Or by analogy, there will always be wolves in the forest. Therefore, the forest residents must be allowed to arm themselves. You arm yourself to protect yourself from wolves, not to join them. So he says, okay, I'll shut up and let Messrs. Penn and Teller speak for themselves. 90 worthy seconds. Warning, the F word is illustrated. I think I will go ahead and play this.
So what does the Second Amendment actually say? A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's it. Not a lot of words, just very specific ones.
It means that the states have the right to have a well-regulated militia. And a 20-year-old kid carrying an assault weapon on the streets of downtown America has absolutely nothing to do with a well-regulated militia.
Well, no. Read the words. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. Sure, you need an organized military force to defend your country, but the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This is the people, in contrast with the militia. It doesn't say the right of the militia to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It says the right of the people. Now, why the word people? Because the people who wrote this had just fought a war for 2 years against a tyrannical state militia. They knew the time might come when they'd have to do that again. So they made the possession of weapons a right that the militia could never take away. Now, gun control advocates say the phrasing is clumsy, and the comma separating the state from the people is just a pause to get your breath. Strange, they can't seem to point out any other places where those hack framers fucked up the wording.
Okay, now, so, get it? Once again, this is the Jewish perspective. Yes, Penn and Teller are Jewish, and of course, I agree with this perspective. Maybe it's because of the 5% Jew that I have in my bloodlines, or the 10% West Asia, or I should say, what is it? No, it's East Mediterranean. That's it. I almost forgot my family background. Is that the reason why I understand this? Surely anybody with more than 50 IQ of 50 can understand what was just been said. Now, what I want to do is go to this article. How the Nazis used gun control. By Stephen Halbrook, December 2nd, 2013. The Weimar Republic's well-intentioned gun registry became a tool of evil. The perennial gun control debate in America did not begin here. The same argument for and against were made in the 1920s in the chaos of Germany's Weimar Republic, which opted for gun registration. Law-abiding citizens complied with the law, but the communists and the Nazis committing acts of political violence did not. In 1931, Weimar authorities discovered plans for a Nazi takeover in which Jews would be denied food, and persons refusing to surrender their guns within 24 hours would be executed. They were written by Werner Best, a future Gestapo official. In reaction to such threats, the government authorized the registration of all firearms and the confiscation thereof if required for public safety. The Interior Minister warned that the records must not fall into the hands of any extremist groups. In 1933, the ultimate extremist group led by Adolf Hitler seized power and used the records to identify, disarm, and attack political opponents and Jews. Constitutional rights were suspended, and mass searches for and seizures of gun and dissident publications ensued. Police revoked gun licenses of Social Democrats and others that were not politically reliable. During the 5 years of repression that followed, society was cleansed by the National Socialist regime. Undesirables were placed in camps where labor made them free. And normal rights of citizens were taken from, you guessed it, the Jews. I'll go over the reason why in just a minute. The Gestapo banned independent gun clubs and arrested their leaders. Gestapo counsel Werner Best issued a directive to the police forbidding issuance of firearm permits to Jews. In 1938, Hitler signed a new gun control act. Now that many enemies of the state had been removed from society, some restrictions could be slightly liberalized, especially for the Nazi Party members. You see how this works, folks? But Jews were prohibited from working in the firearm industry, and the .22 caliber hollow point ammunition was banned. The time had come to launch a decisive blow to the Jewish community, to render it defenseless so that its ill-gotten property could be redistributed as an entitlement to the German Volk. Please here, folks, let's grow some brain cells. I will continue. The German Jews were ordered to surrender all their weapons, and the police had all the records on all who had registered them. Even those who gave up their weapons voluntarily were turned over to the Gestapo. This took place in the weeks before what became known as the Night of the Broken Glass, or Kristallnacht, occurred in November 1938. That the Jews were disarmed before it minimized any risk of resistance is the strongest evidence that the pogrom was planned in advance, and this is what I'm getting to in just a few minutes. This was plotted and planned in advance. An incident was needed to justify unleashing the attack. In other words, never let a crisis go to waste. I believe it was written before Saul Alinsky, but it's on page 89 of Saul Alinsky's book concerning radicalism. That incident would be the shooting of a German diplomat in Paris by a Polish Jew. Hitler directed propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels to orchestrate the Night of the Broken Glass. This massive operation, allegedly conducted as a search for weapons, entailed the ransacking of homes and business and an arson of synagogues. SS Chief Heinrich Himmler decreed that 20 years be served in a concentration camp by any Jew possessing a firearm. Rusty revolvers and bayonets from the Great War were confiscated from Jewish veterans who had served with distinction. 20,000 Jewish men were thrown into concentration camps and had to pay ransoms to get released. The U.S. media covered the above events, and when France fell to Nazi invasion in 1940, the New York Times reported that the French were deprived of rights such as free speech and firearms possession, just as the Germans had been. Frenchmen who failed to surrender their firearms within 24 hours were subject to the death penalty. No wonder that in 1941, just days before the Pearl Harbor attack, Congress reaffirmed Second Amendment rights and prohibited gun registration. In 1968, bills to register guns were debated, with opponents recalling the Nazi experience and the supporters denying that the Nazis ever used registration records to confiscate guns. The bills were defeated as every such proposal has ever since, including recent universal background check bills. As in Weimar Germany, some well-meaning people today advocate severe restrictions, including bans and registrations on gun ownership by law-abiding persons. Such proponents are in no sense Nazis, and it would be a travesty to compare today's situation to the horrors of Nazi Germany. Still, as history teaches, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Well, I partly disagree with his last paragraph because his previous statement before it, he says that this was planned in advance. So either it was planned in advance or it wasn't. Now, I need to find President Trump's latest tweet. I got to figure out where it's at. Maybe it's on Zero Hedge. And it's very disturbing, folks. Nope. Wait a minute. Here we go. Right here. Remember the words, never let a crisis go to waste. All right. We see something very similar in Donald Trump's own tweets here. He says, we cannot let those killed in El Paso, Texas, and Dayton, Ohio die in vain. Likewise, for those seriously wounded, we can never forget them. And those many who came before them, Republicans and Democrats, must come together and get strong background checks, perhaps marrying this legislation with desperately needed immigration reform. We must have something good, if not great, come out of these two tragic events. Now, folks, what we've got here, I may have to read some of this article. Following this weekend's series of mass shootings that left roughly 30 people dead, President Trump on Monday suggested passing a new gun control legislation which could be tied to immigration reform in a reversal from his previous stance on gun control. Right? In a third tweet, Trump seemed to blame the fake news media for the anger and rage that has led to these mass shootings. Right? You can see this here. On Saturday, a gunman killed 20 people and wounded dozens more during an attack at a Walmart in El Paso. Less than a day later, another gunman killed at least 9 people and wounded another 24 in Dayton, Ohio. The shootings aren't believed to be linked. They're not believed to be linked. And while the first gunman was quickly exposed as a right-wing extremist, well, maybe. My personal opinion, there's no such thing. There is no difference between a right-wing extremist and a left-wing extremist. But that's another subject matter. The second has been revealed to be a leftist supporter of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. The disturbed young man also revealed in his social media profiles that he was a Satanist and a member of the Democrat Socialists of America. Democrats are renewing their calls for the Senate to take up universal background check bill that the House passed earlier this year. And by the looks of it, President Trump appears now to support that measure. See, so what I'm going to do now, folks, is read a statement that I typed up this morning. The entire government, both Democrat and Republican, are colluding in a 3-point plan against the people and against the Constitution, which they swore on the Bible and raised their hand up in the air to heaven to uphold. And please understand, folks, that swearing in this way and then swerving from the truth brings down a curse. The hand on the Bible will bring down a curse upon that person, and the other hand in the air brings another curse, which would make it a double curse. Okay, so the three-point plan that the Democrats and the Republicans are colluding against the people and against the Constitution are as follows. The government is spending trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars every year, and they're doing it to the point where the deficit cannot be paid off without drastic action. Please understand, folks, that point number one is deliberate. Both parties are participating and colluding in this three-point plan. Number two, the second point, the second part of this plan is to create a crisis to enact gun control seizures, or to wait for a crisis to happen to enact gun seizures. We are witnessing that right now as I'm speaking. It has, let's see, I'll skip that. The Democrats and Republicans are jumping at the chance to collude against the American people to seize all our guns, just like the Weimar Republic and Nazi Germany did. I just read the statement from that particular statement from, what was it called? Let me see here. I would suggest that folks link to this, please, by Stephen P. Holbrook. Number three, once guns have been seized, then you blame capitalists, aka the Jews, for all that is wrong in the world, and to justify then seizing their assets and displacing them. You think I'm wrong? You see, the Weimar Republic and the Nazis, that was not the first time that happened. No, the Christians in Europe, yes, I'm going to say Christians because it was the Christians who did it. They did it over and over and over and over again, and it did not start with King Edward I of England. It did not. It started before him. Please understand that, as the National Review correctly says, what happened in Nazi Germany, beginning with Kristallnacht, was a pogrom. Now, what you need to do is you need to go and search through history. And you need to look up all the pogroms that were committed against the Jews. And you will see that the Holocaust happened over and over and over and over again. And folks, you must understand, when the Jews say never again, yes, and I will wear this boldly in their defense and in the honor of the Jews, when they say never again, they mean never again. And I'm telling you that what is happening right now, the world including the United States, is going on a collision course with the Jewish people, with all of the Israeli people scattered around the world, and the state of Israel in the Holy Land today. This is where this whole thing is headed. Please do not be fooled by the partisan double talk going on in Washington, D.C. This is a strategy that is being worked out by both the Republicans and the Democrat Party.